The current stalemate in Turkey's European Union accession process has implications for two very contemporary dynamics in world politics today. One relating directly to Middle East politics, and the question there is whether Turkey has been realigning itself, its position within the Western alliance. Part of that is NATO, the other part is, or has been, its very close interrelationships with the European Union over many, many decades as a candidate country, as a country that is in a customs union agreement with the European Union. Secondly, of course, in the context of Brexit, in the context of a stalled process of EU enlargement, there are questions as to the relevance of the European Union as a political project. So within that wider framework as well, the current stalemate in Turkey's EU accession is quite relevant. Turkey actually applied for membership of the European Economic Community in 1959. But it was only given full candidacy status in 1999. That's when I started my PhD, in fact, in a different continent, in a different millennium. So when I met a lot of my peers for the first time, they assumed I'll be doing my PhD on maybe Turkey-EU relations. My stock answer back then was that if and when Turkey joined the European Union, it would be a very different Turkey, radically different Europe. I thought it would be a very long shot. But at the moment, it looks like an even longer, quite improbable scenario. So I'll try to go over some of the factors that seem to make this quite impossible at the moment. There are structural problems with Turkey's EU candidacy, one of them being Cyprus. That issue couldn't be resolved in the years that followed Turkey's official candidacy. And a lot of people in Turkey think that no matter what Turkey does, there will be a potential veto on the side of Cyprus and by extension on Greece that will prevent the process from becoming a reality. Having said that, it is true that there has also been a palpable decline in enthusiasm on the part of Turkish policymakers for European Union membership over the past, especially decade. What explains that is an important question. I think there are three interrelated dynamics to that mystery. One has to do with the fact that Turkey, along with a group of other countries, has been considered an emerging power that together indicate a shift in the global economic and political power from the Western core to the East, a shift in the center of gravity for world politics and the economy. Of course, a well-known example of that would be the rise of China, a far more self-confident Russia, India there, and Turkey is considered in that group of countries, maybe not as one of the leading members, but somewhere along the lines of Mexico, Argentina, South Africa, rising middle powers. And in the minds of Turkish nationalists and a lot of Turkish policymakers, that is a very structural change in the world system, in that the EU is a little bit passé. The West is in perhaps relative decline, and the thought of sacrificing a significant chunk of your sovereignty to join a project that seems to be in decline seems fairly unattractive to Turkish policymakers. So that's one thing, Turkey's perceived status within the world. A second issue is, of course, that over the past decade, Turkey moved from being a flawed democracy to something called a competitive authoritarian regime. That essentially means that although there's a certain level of democratic competition for political office, the main character of the regime, of the political system, is increasingly authoritarian. And the kinds of reforms required, especially on the part of redemocratization, as enshrined in the Copenhagen criteria, would mean something akin to political suicide for Turkey's current regime, and that is the governing AKP and the President Erdogan. That kind of political reform process would be unthinkable. So that is the second domestic political issue. Third, of course, is that Europe has always made a very convenient cultural other for Turkey's Islamists. So seen from that perspective, it makes political sense to play towards the political base of the AKP and Erdogan, that let's keep the process alive technically, although talks are frozen at the moment. Turkey is still technically a candidate country, perhaps to prevent a political and economic fallout from the process. And here I note that Turkey is already in a customs union with the European Union, so there is a significant economic interdependence there. But keep the process alive in the full knowledge that they have no intention of going along with a full membership in what they would consider a Christian club. Right? It's the Western alliance in some ways. Turkey is even trying to partly redesign its relationships with the United States within the NATO alliance. So it does represent the kind of cultural fault line that is there to be politically exploited very effectively, and that would be the third factor. But essentially, to sum up once again, Turkey's perceived status within the global system, an emerging power, as opposed to the perceived decline of the West and Europe being a weaker alliance there. Secondly, domestic political reasons, the burden of potential redemocratization in Turkey and the current issues with human rights and minority rights, that is unthinkable. And third, there's the cultural element. So based on these reasons, I don't really see Turkey getting any closer to becoming a full member of the European Union. And on top of that, there are certain structural issues that still remain unresolved.